despite us having a good constitution, despite us having institutions in place, what's ailing us? Why is it that despite one of the most expensive election processes, we are still at war with one another? What are those things? And I think to that extent, it tries to resolve those. It tries at least to present answers for them, to them. The reality is that in politics, of course, those who had thought, and you remember that already there had been a lot of attacks on the document in terms of expectations of those fundamental things that it was going to do. I think those then who then found, oh, it doesn't, go as far as they thought it would go, would obviously feel, content. Right. But politics being what it is, of course, contestations will be there. And it's very early days to say whether or not it produced a political, not a legal tsunami.
Right. All right, a political tsunami. Yeah. Professor Yash Pal, Kamodo is saying that we might not have a kind of another revolutionary document like the 2010 Constitution. But is that what we do need? Was that the wrong expectation of Kenyans having come to another very hotly contested, divisive election?
Well, I think there's no harm in amending a constitution. We have, after all, been there for 10 years nearly, and if there are clear violations of good practice or they're entitled to raise these issues. But looking at this whole episode with the two parties or two groups within one party and so on, it seems to me that the whole thing was driven not by the great good of this country, but very much to deal with conflicts, greed, competition among politicians. And at least
what's the evidence of that for you?
Well, it's, the news papers every day, you have your program, and it's pretty clear from the style of thing. I mean, it's true. These key people are very vocal and they speak openly, and it's clear there's a lot of tension within the party, and now we may be moving to a new era with the presidency coming to an end and so on, and people competing for their position. Some people might want to make changes because they think that the structure of the constitution in terms of the government and relationship with parliament need to be amended.
Let me ask you, as a constitutional expert, what were you expecting from the BBI? What should they have done?
I thought that their role was, and they may have stayed within that, their role was to improve some features of the Constitution. In fact, there were 9 particular items which they gave to this body, and they said these are all very good things, and we must maintain them, which is very different from the outcome that we have reached. There the idea was that we mustn't put the Constitution to jeopardy, we must protect it, and there are these 9 very good provisions, and there are others, and your role was to see how we could strengthen that rather than change the Constitution.
To your mind, which would have required that strengthening, for instance, that would have achieved the 9-point agenda? Is it really focusing on what will make our elections transparent? Is it the structure of government? What would you have done?
Well, I mean, I think different people have different views, but at that time, as I read it, and I did spend some time with the Commission, that they were more concerned with making sure that the present Constitution is strengthened, and questions of integrity, all that should be ensured. Of course, during the process, the focus changed, and we got into slightly different area.
Right.
But I also do say that they did a serious attempt at looking at the state of the country in different areas which have some bearing on the Constitution.
Okay.
I think there has been a lot of, as I said earlier, a lot of scholarship in this area by scholars, experts, and they don't seem to have referred to that. So their analysis is not as subtle as it should have been.
Yeah, and there's some people like Professor Menya, for instance, Kamoto, who have said that the report, some of its language even sounds gossipy, if you like. David D. Puts it this way. He calls it political fraud, and he says, and I quote, Raila groupies are about to wake up to the realization that BBI ceremony was kuvunja kamati ya handshake. What do you think of that?
I think, I mean, the truth of the matter is, we need to be careful about expectations. Let me tell you my greatest fear. We have enough regressive forces in this country to pull us backwards. My greatest fear was that we'd end up with proposals that would take back from what we have achieved post-2010. I think that was my greatest fear. And right now, my greatest fear also is that the conversation about the BBI will be so strong about politics and about the reorganization of the executive that we'll forget the very many other things that the report says, which is really where Kenyans want their solutions to be found. Almost 70% of that report is actually not about changing the Constitution. It's actually about implementing what we already have. It's about respecting the laws that exist now. It's about understanding our problem and finding solutions to our problem. It's about issues to do with young people, about debt, about the economy, about about respect, about parenting, about the sorts of conversations that I think most Kenyans are more concerned about. But the conversations about politics and the prime minister and what change, that's usually a little more exciting. But that's not where the problem of the country is. And my fear is that these conversations on politics and the structure will take away all the oxygen, and that's what we'll concentrate on. So I wouldn't be so critical. I mean,
is that though because it is, in its core, a political document born of a political contention and process?
Inevitably. But if you look at the 9 issues that were identified, those not just about politics. It's about shared prosperity. Of course, politics has implications on those issues. But my worry is that we are not going to hold government accountable to implement even things that are administrative. Like I said, a lot of the issues in the document are purely administrative. Right. Things that the government can actually do now. And in fact, what I would be saying is that let's in fact take those things and say, government, you don't even need to go for referendum. You don't need to go back to parliament. These 50 things you can actually start implementing tomorrow. Tax holidays for young businesses. Those are not things that require any changes in the law. So what we are saying is that let us extract those things that are progressive from the report, and there are many. Start implementing them now. Okay. Let us not ensure that the politics become so loud. I mean, right now we are talking about process. Even before people know what we are doing a referendum about, the average Kenyan, in fact, the average politician, I can bet, has not read this report.
And
when
probably
you listen
won't.
to them, and probably won't. But already we're being drawn into the conversation, is it referendum or not? Referendum on what? We don't even have constitutional amendment proposals so that we decide whether they require threshold. So I'm saying for media and for ourselves, let's keep pushing the conversation about the things that really matter to the rank and file on this. Yeah.
And we'll return to it, but let's start with well, this is the news. So what has excited or dominated headlines have been proposals on the executive, Professor Ghai. And, we've circled this mountain before about what the benefit or lack thereof is of a prime minister's position. Yeah. And there are recommendations for that in this particular report. But some are holding that it appears to be more of a glorified leader of the majority and possibly even diversionary to the extent that those who have been supporting the creation of a prime minister's post really envisaged one that had significant powers, maybe for some even arguably more than the president. What do you think about the inclusion of that post in this document and whether it is actually substantial?
Well, I think the question of structure of authority or government took me a little bit by surprise. I do know that the president at the moment has no particular regard for what we might call a parliamentary system, which is not strictly a parliamentary system, but it is dressed up as that. And but Raila, I think, for quite a long time, has been a supporter of what you might call a parliamentary system, and he has been consistently arguing for that. But I think why they chose this moment is not so clear to me. Nor am I convinced that what they are trying to achieve in terms of the document, it won't really achieve the objectives of a parliamentary system. Parliamentary system is a very old system. It's majority in the Commonwealth countries, and I myself was arguing very as strongly as I could that we really need a parliamentary system rather than a presidential system, especially given that we are a land of many different communities and so on. And the system of this kind of system is more able to accommodate the diversity than if you have a president.
They seem to be pushing for a hybrid system. So
well, it has become. I mean, I won't say I agree with you that it's not. One doesn't know what's it doing. Okay. You have a president, but you still have then you have a prime minister. Normally, a system that I know of, the role then of the president would be somewhat, kind of, I won't say decorative, but it's just like the Queen in England. But it's the Prime Minister who has the major responsibility. Right. Now, this is not happening here with us. Okay.
Let me just come to you. I beg your pardon for that. Kamoto, very quickly, because we are running out of time. But one of the other issues he talks about is devolution. If you could just jump onto it.
For me, by the way, one of the reasons why I would say let's move with BBI for another reason is that it has required the allocation, the minimum allocation to counties to raise to 35%. One of the greatest contestations we've had in this country has been in allocating money to devolved systems. And if you remember that inclusion was not always about inclusion of politicians, because we've defined inclusion to almost mean we need more politicians at the top. It was actually inclusion at the level of strengthening devolved units. So if we achieve nothing else but ensure that we have 35% of our money is going to the county government, Kenyans will feel included, because even when it is lost in their neighborhood. Even when, and then we create, and then it proposes, ways in which we can improve the systems of accountability. Right. That can only be good. The ultimate solution, one of the major solutions to Kenya's problems is going to be strengthening of devolved systems. These are the things we can tweak here and there, but if we can strengthen devolved systems, if we can ensure, it even proposes the administrative issues about ensuring we don't have national functions at the top, that we're ensuring that money follows functions. Those sorts of things actually don't require constitutional change. If we can do those, we actually would have helped Kenyans much more than most other proposals.
Right. Just two final quick questions, and I want to start with you, Professor. On divisive elections, BBI claims that it's, quote, the high stakes of the winner-take-all system, which leads to extreme skepticism and mistrust in the electoral process. To your mind, is that the real issue, and do they sidestep the fact that we don't have credible elections, that we have seen rigged elections, is the actual problem?
Well, it is a problem, but there's a different solution to that than what they are doing. I mean, I think they are. What worries me is that they have quite a good agenda, but they have made very little effort to look at the existing scholarship, and I think the whole thing for me worries that it has become a quarrel between Ruto and the other side, and I think their analysis of what's been going wrong over the last 20-30 years is pretty good, but But that research has been done for a long, long time, but it is rather weak, I think, on remedy. So I was a bit disappointed. I, on the whole, support some of their approaches, but I get very much the feeling that this is a quarrel between two factions of the party, and that's all it is.
All right. As we conclude, we spoke to Paul Mwangi, who's the Joint Secretary of the BBI Task Force, Kamodo, and he said it was not their job to propose constitutional changes. And he envisaged that it may need to go to a committee to refine the document and back to the people. What's your say on this? Do we need a committee of experts first? Do we go to Bomas for a convention?
Well, legally, we will have at some point to determine. I imagine that this document is going to go to the people, because this is not a conclusive document. They have said there needs to be changes, and maybe there are some things that will be adjusted. When that happens, we then need to separate those things that are administrative, those things that are statutory, which means they only require changes in the law, and those which are constitutional. Now, those that are, that work will have to be done at a technical level. How that technical level looks like, I don't know. On the constitutional amendments, the supporters of the bill will have to make a very political and legal decision. Do you go to Parliament, recognizing that in Parliament, almost every constitutional amendment bill, even the ones that Parliament has agreed in Kamukunji on gender, dies because people don't turn up, you know, and so you can very easily sabotage that process because of the high threshold. But it is possible to mix a parliamentary process and one that involves the popular initiative process of the members of the county assembly, because that one only requires a bare minimum, majority, a simple majority. So there may be need for that. I would be very hesitant at this point in our country, before the election, unless it was absolutely necessary to go a referendum route. Because not only it is fiscally expensive, it is also very, very expensive politically. And then we would then be heading to an election that would be very, very divisive. So the thing is that if it is possible to reach a consensus, because the document, by the way, it is very clear from its spirit that it sought to remove all the contentious issues. I think even the parliamentary system, part of it was that if you had put it there, the contestations would have been very, very strong, so put those aside. So it is possible for us to actually agree at a political level that this document be adjusted slightly, but passed as is without us having to go
with
to
a consensus document.
So that we don't go to a contentious referendum before elections, not for the issues that are here.
Prof, what say you?
Well, I think it'll be good to have agreement before the elections, but I don't see it happening at the moment. And there are two very strong groups from the same party, and I think we are going to get in great trouble unless we have some broad agreement on how we want to change the Constitution. I think. But again, I said that before. I think it's a quarrel between two groups within the same party. They are very much concerned about themselves, whatever they might say. The way that the president called this meeting the other day, I mean, it's not the way you would do if you really are believing in substance of it. It's a matter of few well-placed people. You joined them with again. I didn't get the feeling that they were really at all anxious to convey to the people the kind of values they now want to pursue and so on.
Do Kenyans take back the document if it goes back to the people? So that may, politicians may want what they want, but if it comes to the people, is that the way to redeem it?
Well, it could be. It could be, because people will then have had an opportunity to examine what's being asked for, what are the implications of that, and then I think it would be, and it would involve people, it would be more democratic, than it's going to be otherwise.
Okay, and I want to thank you both very much.